Hi guys, welcome back to Sam Talks Cars. Sorry I've been quiet a little bit lately. It's supposed to be part of the weekly podcast series. However, about a week ago or so, I wrote a buyer's guide for the B7 Audi RS4 platform. That seems to be going down quite well. Hopefully that's going to help any prospective buyers get hold of a car. So I'm looking forward to seeing, hopefully, some people enjoying a new car. Anyway, COVID-19 pandemic. It's been 10 weeks now in the UK. Hope everyone's managing to keep well and staying away from each other, as sad as that sounds. Today I want to talk about, is now the perfect time to buy your dream car, purely because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The global economic climate is somewhat on its knees due to the increased uncertainty and extended lockdowns. But what does this mean for the performance car market? Well, I've certainly been window shopping to stave off boredom while in isolation, and I've noticed a bit of a trend. Most importantly being, there's more supercars and high-performance cars being listed for sale. And while they're not all listed at bargain prices, traders and private sellers are in somewhat of a vulnerable position. This is very good news for the buyer. So if you're in a position, or were in a position before lockdown and aspiring to own one of your dream cars, it could actually be the perfect time for you. I'm going to give the game away a little bit here. As you know, I've got an R35 GT-R, or had. I listed it provisionally for sale, but just because I wanted to see where the market was, I priced it quite fairly. And 2 days later it was bought, paid for, and it left yesterday, so I'm a bit sad about that. But I've just got this really uncomfortable feeling of the market falling apart. I'm not saying we're going to slip into a deep depression, but when I bought my GTR in January, there were only 2 listed below £30,000. Obviously, straight cars, not written off, not crashed or stolen or anything. But even still, there were only 2 beneath 30 grand, and mine was one of them, and I bought it. I think in the last 10 days to a couple of weeks, I've noticed at least 8 people join some of the Nissan GTR forums and groups that have been buying the cars beneath 30k. There were 10 or 15 the other day across eBay and Auto Trader. And that just got me thinking, if I'm going to enjoy this car for another year or 18 months, put maybe another 10,000 miles on it or more, or a couple of track days, I'm actually in quite a vulnerable position. Because a Nissan GTR isn't the easiest car to sell at the best of times. Never mind if, say, mine, which had 78,000 when I got rid of it, 76 when I bought it, if you think of that as a 90,000 mile car, then that's going to be very difficult to get rid of. 7 owners, 90,000 miles, bit of body works, it's done 90,000 miles. You end up with a car that's actually worth next to nothing, really. I mean, I got £28,000 for it, which I'm quite happy with. I made a bit of money on it, but I still had to supply brand new brake discs all round, some decatted downpipes, some new tyre pressure sensors and that. So I put some effort into the sale, but I still didn't get, a particularly strong price. I did well out of it, but that's more because of what I bought it for. If I'd spent, say, £29,000 or £30,000 on it, then I'd obviously be down money now. And I just feel that it was something that's going to get exacerbated the longer COVID goes on. We're 10 weeks deep now, and I've got a couple of friends, as much as I'm upset to say, that are now considering selling some of their cars, or one of their cars, because they're not sure where they stand when they come back to this. A lot of companies are realising they don't need as many people, or that more people can work from home. So there's so much uncertainty surrounding people's careers, people's work and all that they're not sure what to do with the cars. But anyway, I've waffled on long enough, so I'll get back to the point. So I'm not going to profess to be an economic expert, nor am I an experienced motor trader, but I've owned a lot of cars in a short space of time, and I'm always watching the market. Before I bought my GTR, I wanted an R8 V10, and the cheapest cars then were around £43,000. I know it's all mileage and spec dependent, but there are now 3 to 4 examples listed for under £40,000. Now, a few grand may not sound like a huge hit, but for me, that would be the difference between buying a car or not. If you haggle a little bit and get maybe another £500 to £1,000 or so knocked off, that can mean you get a very good deal. And again, it's the difference between buying a car or not. Ferrari 360 prices have also come down, with a few examples listed from around £40,000. Now, yes, I know they're the less desirable F1 transmission, which is like an SMG system in an old BMW. And you're not going to get Rosso Corsa over tan. You're going to get some obscure silvery blue or green Ferrari. But buying a Ferrari, buying a Ferrari. If you're going to drive it, I wouldn't say the colour matters too much, especially if you're going to pay 40 grand for one. I wrote a buyer's guide to the B7 RS4, as I mentioned earlier, as their prices have plummeted lately, and with the current situation, I feel this is only going to compound the issue. But you could probably pick yourself up a good example with under 100,000 miles for 10 to 14k. I feel a bit stupid as I treated myself to the GTR in January, and although I paid next to nothing for it, I could maybe get out of it with a sale if I'm lucky, which thankfully I now have. But it's risky and I may regret it. It's very tempting though, seeing how many prestige marques are falling to a lower price point. Now, of course, any bargain purchase you're likely to make during this period would need to be a fairly long-term investment, rather than in the daily driver category. The world isn't in a good financial predicament at the moment, so I can't see any cars appreciating further. I think we've seen the last of the multi-million pound cars being purchased at auction and then sitting in garages to appreciate further. But if you've always lusted after an old 996 Porsche GT3 or a Ferrari 360 or a V10 R8, that's my list and they're cars I want. But you get my point. Now could be the time to actually, spend the money and get one, providing you're in the financial predicament to get so. So what I was saying about it being a fairly long-term investment, I've got away with it having my GTR for 5 months or so. But thanks to COVID, I wasn't driving it. So it's only done, I think, 2,700 miles I did. I think I went from 76.2 to 78.9 or so. So I'm about 2,700 miles, which is quite annoying, but I've had a service done. I've got some new brakes for it. So I could have kept it long term. My issue was, like I said, put some miles on the car and I end up with a 24 grand GTR. I can save money, don't get me wrong, but the money that I'm saving is just being hemorrhaged by the value of the car. So in a year's time, I'd be no better off. I'd still be looking to spend 30k. While getting rid of the GTR for a little bit more than I paid for it gives me a position to upgrade again. I can now start to see what happens with the R8. If the V10 start to drop, a little bit lower, maybe mid-30s. There's a couple of high-powered GTRs in the mid-30 grand price point. There's a lot more options for me now, is my point. And I also wouldn't go diving into car finance. We've just seen the world fall apart financially. So there are thousands of people massively in negative equity on their cars. So what does this mean? So if you financed, for example, an Aston Martin DB11 for around its market value, I'm not saying you've paid the full amount on finance, but I'm saying if you've put maybe a £20,000 deposit and you've financed, say, 80 grand. So it's a £100,000 car. Unfortunately, a fairly new supercar that's not massively rare and probably got mileage on because you're using it is going to be the biggest hit. So your Aston Martins, your Ferraris, your big Mercedes cars, these are all going to be hit quite hard. So if you're financing that car and paying the interest on top, that £100,000 quickly becomes 110, 105, depending on your level of interest. So potentially there's a lot of people now losing money on their cars purely because the car isn't worth as much as it was. And that's all thanks to the COVID pandemic. So if you have a healthy credit score and you can get a good personal loan rate, mine was around 3%, but nowhere near the value of the car, so fairly irrelevant, but it is still doable. You can treat yourself over 2 to 3 years, even 4 to 5 if you wish, and you can sell the vehicle when the market is recovered. However, you'd be no way tied to the vehicle for an extended period. So worst case, take a small hit on the value of the car when you needed to. I've always done it that way because I've got freedom. I bought the GTR for 27 grand. I threw a bit of money at it, put some parts on it, made a bit of money on the parts, which was quite lucky. I'm not saying you do that all the time, but I've made a bit of money and I've managed to sell the car now 5 months later because I've looked at COVID and gone, this could be really bad for me financially if I'm not careful. So I've taken a gamble, but I've also taken the safe bet. And as much as I regret it and I miss the car, I'm much happier having 30-something thousand pounds in an ISA when it's safe and not going to go anywhere than effectively in a car. It's like gambling on a stock market. It could go up, it could go down, but unfortunately it was more likely to go down than up. Honestly, as I said, I would encourage a bank loan because loads of them are around 3%, maybe even lower now because of the pandemic. Car finance tends to be 7-8% depending on who you get it from, and it's very difficult to sell a car on finance as you need to settle the balance before the buyer can drive away. So then you've got to have sort of the walk of faith, the leap of faith, from the buyer. You've then got to get on the phone, usually when they're stood next to you. I did this years ago. And basically the money goes into your account, then it goes straight to the finance company, however much it is, and then the car is, HBI clear. And that's a very, very difficult thing to do because there's not so many people that are going to buy a car like that. Certainly not a Nissan GTR, for example, or an Aston Martin. So I always encourage people to either pay cash or get a personal loan. So then the money it's tied to you. It's not to the vehicle. And it just makes it easier and gives you that freedom. Again, I'm not going to profess to be a market expert. I'm not sitting here saying, you're going to pick up a bargain, you're going to make some money. But what I'm saying is cars are dropping money at the moment. So if you were thinking of doing it, you may save a few £1,000s on the purchase price. I don't know what the market's going to be like in a year, 18 months. I like to think it would be stronger. It really depends on how prolonged the after effects of COVID are. But my point still stands. If an R8 V10 has gone from 43 grand to maybe 38, I'd rather take that chance than I've bought one 6 months ago. But yeah, anyway, I hope this helps anyone that may be looking in the market. If you are selling your car, obviously don't give it away. Depends on your financial situation. But if you can hold out for a good price, there are still buyers out there. And don't let someone lowball you just because of the crisis. I had loads of people offering me, even below trade value for my car, the amount of people offering me £23,000, £24,000, cash today, those sort of people. The people that won't ask you any questions about the car because deep down, they're not really that interested. They just want a bargain to sell. So bear that in mind, keep your foot down and just see where it goes. Best of luck, everyone.